Greetings and welcome to Illinois in Focus, powered by the Center Square. I'm Greg Bishop, Illinois editor at Franklin News Foundation, publisher of the Center Square Newswire service. This week in Illinois, the Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte will join me to discuss several stories impacting Illinois' economy. The ongoing federal corruption case against former Illinois House Speaker Michael Madigan and the ComEd 4, and the field surfacing for upcoming elections. All of that and more for Illinois in Focus.
Teacher Lauren Johnson returned all the graded essays but one. He believed that one student was capable of more.
I don't believe taking the middle of the road is your philosophy. This time, write something you really believe.
The student wrote a new one about excellence. Instead of just grading an essay, Mr. Johnson changed a life. I am that student. I became a writer, and I wrote this to thank him.
Thank a teacher and pass it on from passiton.com.
Welcome back to Illinois in Focus. I'm Greg Bishop. Illinois' economic indicators have traditionally lagged the rest of the nation in rebounding from economic downturns. Now, recent analysis from WalletHub shows inflation's playing a role, not just in Chicago or the St. Louis metro region, but the rest of the state. The Center Square reporter Jim Talamonte joins us to discuss some of the latest. Jim, obviously inflation's been a major issue the past 3 to 4 years. Now, numbers coming out today indicate that inflation has remained flat. Trump administration saying that they have defeated Biden's inflationary policies. But we're still feeling those impacts, Jim. The prices are up from where they were 5 years ago for everything from energy to eggs to just common household goods. Tell us about the analysis that WalletHub did looking at some major metro areas and what it means for the rest of the state of Illinois.
Yeah, interesting statistical analysis here involving the Consumer Price Index, which measures inflation, and some other key metrics, taking a couple of different snapshots in time over the last year and over the last couple of months. And Chip Lupo, an analyst for WalletHub, said, nationally, since February, inflation really cooled. Over the last few years, prices just skyrocketed on all kinds of items. And that skyrocketing stopped. Now, prices haven't gone back to where they were, say, in 2017, but the major inflation really cooled off. But there was a slight uptick nationwide in June, and at least according to WalletHub's analysis. And in ranking the top 23 major metropolitan areas in the U.S., 2 of the top 5 markets with the biggest inflation problems, according to WalletHub, have big Illinois footprints, Chicago being number 3 and St. Louis being number 4. Of course, a big party, we've got the Metro East and a lot of Illinois people in that St. Louis Metro. But even statewide, we've had inflation issues. And I've talked with Chip about this before, about how we have several issues in our state, be the urban, high cost of living being one in these urban areas, even including some of the smaller urban areas of the state. Also regional supply issues, he mentioned, and policy challenges. And this is where we get into government and government policies and how taxation figures into inflation. Higher government spending, higher government debt numbers. These all factor into inflation. They just make everything more expensive. When your governments aren't spending on services, well, they're spending on interest on loans and just higher costs of everything raise the cost of everything for people in general as well. So Illinois, according to Chip Lupo, is, he says, quote, one of the hardest hit states by inflation. And he says it's indicative of a broader pattern because Illinois struggles more with inflation. We might add, as well as some other economic issues, we just struggle here more in Illinois than other states.
Yeah, and you got to think, too, some of the things that Illinoisans pay for simply just to go to work, filling up the gas tank, right? On July 1st, the gas tax went up tied to inflation. So you can see how these types of policies, when they thought about the gas tax increase back in 2019, I don't think they had the foresight of COVID, and the Biden administration and all of the economic policies that drove up inflation dramatically. But clearly, a lot of policies do play into how Illinoisans and the rest of the country goes about taking part in the economy. Can they afford to be able to not just go to the grocery store and fill up their gas tank, but can they afford to get their kid to that soccer game, or to pay for extracurricular activities, or to even just plan a vacation? So when the cost of household goods continue to increase, when the cost of energy continues to increase, and Jim, you and I have been watching closely all the conversation about energy. And in particular, the drive here in Illinois to have so-called renewable energy with wind and solar, and working to shut down some of the coal-fired power plants. Obviously, getting away from natural resources like coal and natural gas is going to increase the cost of energy as you rely on more expensive forms of energy like wind and solar. Even President Donald Trump indicating that it's very expensive. And these wind and solar things take government subsidies. Where does that money come from, Jim? You and I know it's tax money. It's not the government's money, it's tax money. So clearly all of these policies play a huge role. Something else that you reported on, Jim, this week, interesting statistics about construction workers and new homes. Having these two reports come out really kind of illustrates a tough dynamic. How do we square these two things together, where Illinois construction workers are the highest paid in the U.S., but at the same time, new home building, it's lagging quite a bit in Illinois?
Yeah, we've heard a lot here in the land of Lincoln about housing affordability. Some elected officials in our state have said we have a housing crisis, or at least an affordable housing crisis. Well, what makes housing less affordable? Higher construction costs. So the labor costs are high here in Illinois. We are highest for construction worker pay when factoring in cost of living. Construction Coverage did an analysis and said Hawaii actually is a little bit higher pay, but then when you factor in the higher cost of living in Hawaii, well, then actually Illinois construction workers are the highest paid in the country out of all 50 states, coming in at over $79,000 a year. Nearly 12% more than the next highest state in the Midwest. Our neighbors still rank very well for construction worker pay, but not nearly as high as Illinois. Again, we're just dramatically outside of the range for Midwestern states. Your workers in other Midwestern states still do very well compared with across the country, but just don't have that high salary in Illinois. Of course, they also don't have a high cost of living we have here in Illinois. And then when you look at affordable housing, or housing costs, where new home construction, we're really slumping. And part of that you have to believe is just the cost for builders. When you look at it, part of that is high labor costs. Part of it factors into the inflation we were just talking about, where materials here are just more expensive than they are in other parts of the country. And you look at, for example, Wisconsin, 9th out of 50 with a median wage of just under $67,000. We're still very well paid construction workers in Wisconsin compared to others across the country. And Indiana right behind, Missouri not far behind, all in the top. All of our neighboring states are in the top 15 except for Kentucky. And but again, Illinois just dramatically higher in those extra costs than factor in a home building. And Construction Coverage in a separate study found that our state built the third fewest homes in the U.S. last year, just 3.7 new units per 100 existing homes. National average over 10 new units per 100 existing homes. So we're way behind. And the Springfield metro area especially hurting in that area with even lower than our statewide numbers. So we've got some work to do and some issues to address when it comes to new home construction. As much as the elected officials talk about it, you just have to think, with those two reports side by side, if we don't do something to lower costs, we're still going to have a problem building new homes.
And you also got to think about, when talking about these types of economic indicators, prevailing wage and those types of things, and how those impact public sector jobs. You know, for instance, everything from plumbers, electricians, to even painters. and the higher cost it is in Illinois to finish and complete public works projects. I know it's not, private homes or private residences, but you can still see how wages can definitely drive up the cost of these various services and construction projects that we all rely on. We want a roof over our head. We want roads to get to work. We want all the infrastructure to be where it needs to be. But obviously, when it comes to public dollars that are available here in Illinois, Jim, we've talked about at the Center Square. We've reported on at thecentersquare.com. Ever since I've been at the State House and beyond, the pension situation. It is $140 billion unfunded. It's fluctuated a little bit here and there over the past 10 years, but it's stayed pretty much about $140 plus billion. This is unfunded liability. It's among the highest unfunded liability for public sector pensions in the country. Now, Illinois Comptroller Susana Mendoza, which we'll actually talk about a little bit later on when we're talking about elections, she made an announcement this week that she's making an extra monthly payment in July to make up for November's pension payment, and she's hoping to net a $20 million return on investment by having November's pension payment in the market, supporting the pension fund well ahead of November, so that when we get to November, Mendoza says it's a pretty tough month. Historically, February is a tough revenue month. November is a tough revenue month. And since apparently reportedly we have $1 billion plus in extra revenue for the month of July, Comptroller Mendoza went ahead and decided to double up the monthly payment. $20 million of return on investment, Jim. That is what? A drop in the bucket of the $140 billion unfunded liability? How should taxpayers think about this?
Well, I think, and this isn't the first time she's done this, to be fair. She has done this in the past. But it
actually, just to clarify, she fought to be able to do this.
Right.
Before last year, the comptroller was only allowed to make one monthly pension payment. So 12 pension payments a year. She fought to be able to do these extra pension payments. Only 12 a year, but where possible, she's going to make that extra pension payments in a month to be able to get that return on investment from the markets.
Yeah, and it's something that if I'm a tax person, well, why haven't we been doing this all along? And perhaps in some cases, just because she's not able to, given the financial situation of the state. Also, if you do want to think in political and election terms, well, this positions her as being a fiscally responsible elected official when there's talk that she may make another run for mayor of Chicago, where you consider the fiscal situation of that city. And there's going to be, I think, a lot of focus on fiscal management and budget management and fiscal responsibility and accountability. So, a cynic might say, well, maybe she's positioning herself in that sense. At the same time, as you said, Greg, she's done this before. She has pushed for this before. It's certainly in a state where we've seen so much mismanagement seems to be a responsible move. But at some point, the amount of pension obligation that we have has to be addressed. In addition to just these kind of payments, when do we say, we've got to make some real structural change to the pension system? It's been tried over the last decade, but it just, hasn't moved along. And ultimately, you just have to think that there's going to come a tipping point. But I guess, as you said, a drop in the bucket or a few drops in the bucket is better than no drops at all.
Yeah, and some of the conversations about how do we surmount that $140 billion unfunded pension liability. When I talked with State Representative Stephen Reich a couple of weeks ago, and people can find that story at thecentersquare.com, he said there's no hope. He said the only thing that can happen is if the Constitution's changed to get rid of the pension protection clause in the Illinois Constitution and to reduce the amount of benefits that are going out. He says that's the only thing that's going to change this. And there's no political will at the State House to do such a thing, especially as you've got the unions fighting to change Tier 2 pensions, which was brought about in 2011 to reduce the cost for new hires after 2011. And they say that's not enough for their retirement. It's not going to be enough to meet certain Social Security standards. So they're now trying to get the Tier 2 to essentially be the equivalent of Tier 1. While they've talked about it for about 2 years now, there really hasn't been much movement on that. But clearly it's an issue, probably one of the largest issues that Illinois faces. And it's a major problem for credit rating agencies. Every time they put out a statement about the credit rating, the pensions are something that's brought up as a serious point of contention they need to address in the state of Illinois. This is Illinois in Focus, the weekend edition. I'm Greg Bishop, joined by Jim Talamonte, and you can find these stories and so much more at thecentersquare.com. Jim, ethics, another big issue, right? Right up there with pensions.
Right.
Illinois is regularly in the headlines with cases of corruption from local officials to state house officials. The biggest one that we've seen, Mike Madigan, convicted, 7.5-year sentence handed down. He wasn't the only one ensnarled in this federal investigation, a nearly decade-long federal investigation of alleged corruption against House Speaker Michael Madigan, close confidant Michael McLean, and 3 others tied with Commonwealth Edison, one of the largest utilities in Illinois, if not the largest, and essentially being, accused of handing out political favors to ComEd in exchange for ComEd giving little to do nothing jobs for Madigan's associates. Well, all of the trials seem to be, at least on the district side, are completed with sentences being handed down. Madigan getting 7.5 years. You've got, the ComEd 4 with that process playing out. Before we talk about the ComEd 4, Mike Madigan's appealing his conviction.
Yes, he is. And we kind of knew this was coming. At sentencing, his defense attorneys talked about this, and they suggested they would ask that he be allowed to be released on bond pending the appeal. He is, as of now, scheduled to report to prison on October 13th to begin serving that 7.5-year term. And he was ordered to pay a $2.5 million fine immediately, which was actually more than prosecutors asked for. So, the appeal process potentially could take this, I suppose, out of the hands of Judge Jack Blakey, who handled this case. And I just, given the way this thing has gone, I wouldn't expect, left to his own devices, Blakey would allow Madigan to stay out. He was pretty firm in the sentencing hearing of Madigan. Very direct, some very direct statements to Madigan about the crimes he committed. But Madigan, is still going to try to pull a rabbit out of the hat. I don't know how much hope there is in the motion asking that he be allowed to stay out, and then suggesting there would be appeal. Once again, Madigan's attorneys, and they've done this repeatedly, even, during the trial, after objections, after the verdict, before the sentencing, and now after the sentencing, they have pointed out very directly what they call errors by the court, essentially saying errors by the judge. In the process. So, how much hope they have, I don't know. When you look at Judge Blakey, he's a guy, as we've talked about before, his father helped write some of the very laws that were involved in this case, in the ComEd 4 case. So it just seems to be an uphill climb for Madigan at this point. But one never knows if an appeal is heard and a different judge were to take on the case, and what could happen. But the ethical
and whether he's going to be let out and not have to report to prison while the appeal's ongoing. And that's when you look at comments on videos about the Madigan case, or look at social media, a big criticism people have is, so what? Madigan was convicted. He'll never see the inside of a prison cell, right? That seems to be a large criticism that's thrown out there. But from Blakey's comments that he made at sentencing, it's pretty clear that Madigan is not in a good spot right now.
No, I don't see. I'd be shocked if Blakey allowed him. Now, if this again were to be advanced to an appeals court and another judge has a different take on it, maybe. But yeah, I'd be shocked if Judge Blakey, just given the way the whole thing unfolded, and we went through that sentencing hearing was long, and he talked about how the 200 or so letters written on behalf of Madigan, and the video from Shirley Madigan, the former speaker's wife, that all impacted him. He not only read all the letters, he dwelled on them over a whole weekend. And But then when he came down with a sentence, he was also very firm. How this was, Madigan knew what he was doing. He was the leader of this. Essentially, the judge didn't use the word crime ring, but essentially, this is what he was saying. And that, it would be quite a remarkable change after handing down that sentence that he handed down. If he turned around and said, well, now you can stay out while this appeal goes on, I'd be very surprised.
Of course, ethics reforms at the State House have been elusive. We've seen some, proposals from Republicans, but no advancement in the House Elections and Ethics Committee, let alone any advancement in the state Senate either. But tell us briefly about the difference of opinion of where we're at on that conversation of legislation concerning ethics between Governor Pritzker's lieutenant governor candidate, Christian Mitchell, and a state representative on the Republican side of the aisle that's been pretty close to conversations regarding ethics.
Yeah, it's really, it's remarkable. And I guess like with the pension situation we talked about, there just isn't the political will to get anything done. And now Christian Mitchell said, we've led with ethics. And Governor Pritzker, when he announced Mitchell will be his running mate in 2026, said he's passed big legislation. And I asked Christian Mitchell at his first joint campaign appearance with the governor, I asked Mitchell, will you be the guy who can finally get some ethics reform done? That there have been bipartisan proposals, not only by Republicans. There were several pieces of Democrat legislation involving ethics just didn't advance, didn't get out of committee. But Mitchell said, when we passed the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, CEJA, passed in 2021, we led with ethics. That's what Mitchell said. The governor said ethics was his first principle. So we worked to make sure that the energy legislation, again, we're talking ComEd and other utilities that have been the focus of so many of these scandals. He said, we made sure it was done in the light of day. And but then I talked to State Rep Patrick Windhorst, who's introduced a number of pieces of ethics legislation. He said, well, these were very minor things in CEJA that didn't really provide any meaningful ethics reform. And he said, there's just no desire on the part of the Democratic Party leadership to do any kind of ethics reform. And he, and again, you look at it the same way as the pensions. Things just aren't moving in the legislature. This session, perhaps more than any other, there just wasn't even any effort. The Democrats just want to move past Madigan. That's in the past. And even in January, I asked a new state rep, Maureen Briel, and she said, "Oh, that's in the past. We're moving past that. This is a new day." Several Democrats said that. But when you look at the structure of the House rules, when you look at the way the legislature moves items, how only the Speaker can have the power to call things in the House, it really, the personalities have changed somewhat. Chris Welch may be a different personality than Michael Madigan, but he retains really the same amount of power. And then you look at the state Senate, where the Senate president has been involved with the allegations of getting too much money in campaign donations. Wow, things really don't seem a whole lot different than they did under Madigan.
Yeah, it's Welch said it was a new day when he took the speakership, but the rules practically have pretty much stayed the same. Jim, we've got less than a minute here. The 2026 elections coming up. Of course, the midterms are in March, but November's when the election's going to be. One person who's not going to be on that ballot is Comptroller Susana Mendoza. She announced this week that she is not going to seek another term. And she didn't really show her hand as to where she's going to be going to next. She just simply said, stay tuned. Something we'll be watching closely. And of course, you can get these stories and more at thecentersquare.com. For Jim Talamonte, I'm Greg Bishop. Thank you for joining us. And listeners can keep up with these stories and more at thecentersquare.com.